Hello students. In this video lecture we are going to discuss about operating system structure. First we will look at what is the need for structuring the operating system. The reason that operating systems are required to be well structured is that they are generally large and complex applications. So the operating system is generally the largest software that is running in a computer. It's large because of the number of modules it is having. It's having functionality for handling various tasks. It has to manage memory, it has to manage the IO devices, it has to manage the CPU, security. So there are different aspects to an operating system, and to accommodate all that there is a coding provided for each of the responsibility. So it becomes a large and complex application, and because of this complexity it requires to be properly developed with proper designing. And one way of reducing the complexity or managing the complexity is modularity. So dividing the process or dividing the application into a large number of modules and integrating the modules is a best approach. It's a divide and conquer approach, and even our C programs are based on this idea that whenever you write a program, you always think of the logic in terms of different functions and connect them with the function calls. So it is rarely we write a program which only has one function, and it's not a good programming practice. Every program should have at least two or more functions. So the same modularity is also suggested for operating systems. So every operating system should be having well defined portion or modules which are having carefully designed inputs, outputs and functions. Uh, Generally there are three types of operating systems structures commonly practiced. One is a simple structure or monolithic, which is in other words unstructured. So this is a older school of thought where the operating system is written as a single large application without having any modules. Another is a layered approach. So in layered approach the OS will be divided into different layers, and microkernel is an idea where we reduce the size of the kernel to make it to be as small as possible. And loadable kernel is dynamic kernels. You can load and unload kernels at runtime. Hybrid is a combination of many of these approaches. So these are the common operating system structures that are available. So we will look at each one of them with necessary points. Simple structure. So simple structure, as I told you in the previous slide, it's more of a non-structured operating system. So many operating systems do not have well-defined structures, and frequently such systems are. So the reason that people had made that kind of a unstructured operating system is not because they did not like it, but those operating systems they just were started as a small pieces of code, and then they evolved over a period of time. For example, if you take the DOS operating system, it was not actually originally intended to be a full-fledged operating system. It was started as a casual vacation program. The person who wrote it just started it as a hobby. He just had some passion in coding, so he started writing some coding which then evolved into an actual OS. So he did not plan it. So there was a lack of planning which made it the MS-DOS is an example for that particular example. So it was just originally designed and implemented for a few people who had no idea that it would become so popular. So that is one reason why MS-DOS was not structured OS, and because of this nature that MS-DOS was not made to be a structured one, it has a major vulnerability in terms of protection. The MS-DOS operating system allows any application to directly handle the hardware through commands. So unlike the modern operating systems which all have got the system calls, so no no user application can directly deal with the hardware. They all can access it only with the help of the operating systems. Unlike those operating systems, MS-DOS allowed the direct manipulation of the hardwares by the user applications, which is a major drawback of the MS-DOS OS. So it caused a vulnerability to allow the errant or malicious programs causing the system to crash. They can even format the entire disk just by calling a command called format. So there is a format command available in MS-DOS. So if you by mistake or intentionally write a format C colon, you can even erase the OS itself. So there is a kind of vulnerability existed in the MS-DOS. And another reason why MS-DOS did not have that protection is that at that time the hardwares did not have the mechanism to implement dual modes. So today we have the hardware support for implementing dual mode implementations, but by the time the hardwares did not have the necessary support for dual mode. So the MS-DOS just had one mode, and every application will be running in the same modes, whether it is operating system or user application. They all will be having the equal privilege. So this is how the MS-DOS was designed. So you can see that any application can access anything in a MS-DOS system. And another example of such a poorly structured operating system is Unix. That is original Unix. Today we have got the modern Unix, which is far more reformed, but the initial Unix that was developed was having some issue. But comparing to DOS, here there is it's not completely vulnerable to hardware protection. So Unix did have very good hardware protection. So system calls were in fact implemented in Unix, but it had a different problem. We'll come to that. So like MS-DOS, Unix initially was limited by hardware functionality. It consists of two separate parts, the kernel and the system programs. The kernel is further expanded into series of interfaces and device drivers, which have been added and expanded over the years as Unix has evolved. So under the Unix operating system, the applications are divided into two categories. Anything below the system call interface and above the physical hardware is the kernel. So the modules that are handling the hardware directly, they are all called as the kernel, and the modules that are above the kernel, that is above the system call, they are user applications. So system calls are very much in place in the Unix operating system. So any application that wants to access the hardware has to go through the system calls and invoke the OS modules behind them. What is the okay? So now Unix having that hardware protection to some extent. Now what is the limitation? The limitation here is that the entire OS will be running as a single large kernel, which means there is no modularity available, and it's also in that is also called as monolithic systems. So monolithic systems or monolithic kernel is a term that refers to operating systems which are all implemented as a single large kernel or single large application. So the entire OS will be running simultaneously into the memory. So you have to load the whole operating system and let it to occupy memory and also the CPU. So this is a drawback of Unix operating system, lack of modularity. So it's called as a monolithic structure, and it is difficult to implement and maintain. So another drawback of monolithic structure is modification requires recompiling the entire OS. So if suddenly a new feature has to be added or new functionality has to be added into the existing kernel, then you can't add it at runtime. You have to recompile and restart the entire OS. Only then the changes will be updated. But on the other hand, the advantage is that communication within the kernel is seamless, because every entire operating system is running a single large application, if there is a information communication needed between one module of the OS to another module of the OS, it's more like a function calling. They are not two different entities, they are more of functions within the same program, so they can easily communicate. That is the advantage of the monolithic structure. This is the outline of how the monolithic structure in Unix is implemented. Now we are looking at the next scheme, which is the layered approach. So under layered approach, the operating system can be broken into small pieces called layers. Each layer will be well defined and it will be performing a particular set of tasks. And the implementers have more freedom to change the inner workings of the systems and in creating modular operating systems. Under a top-down approach, the overall functionality and features are determined and are separated into components. A system can be made modular in many ways. One method is layered approach. That is the idea we are discussing, in which the operating system is broken into number of layers. So in the layered approach, the basic idea is that the OS will be divided into layers like layer 0 to layer n. Generally the bottom layer or the layer 0 is the computer hardware, and all the remaining layers are the various modules of the operating system. And typically the highest layer is the user interface. The user is interacting with the operating system through the top layer, and in between the hardware and the user interface we have all other layers. This is the basic the idea of a layered design. So it's going to be like this. So a typical operating system layer consists of data structures and set of routines that are invoked by higher level layers. So this is another characteristic of the layered approach. A layer can only invoke its lower level layers. That means that M layer can invoke the services of M-1 layer, can't access the M+1 layer. So it's not possible to for a layer to invoke the services of the upper layer. It can only access the services of the lower level. This is a restriction. So this kind of a restriction is imposed on the layered architecture, that there is only accessing in one direction. The main advantage of the layered approach is simplicity of construction and debugging. So this limitation also results in easier implementation. So you don't have to bother about any layer calling any other layer. It's all restricted to just that subsequent layers can contact or communicate with each other. Okay, so remember this particular point which defines the layered architecture. So the layers are selected so that each uses the functions and the services of only lower level layers. The first layer can be debugged without any concern of the. Because of this characteristic, if there is any change in a particular layer, it will only affect its upper layer, not all other layers. So you don't have to bother about altering the remaining layers when there is a change in one particular layer. So at most you may have to modify its upper layer, because there is no direct contact by other layers with this particular layer other than the upper layer. But the major difficulty with the layered approach involves appropriately defining the various layers. So because you are going to impose a restriction that only two layers can directly interact, and only the upper layer can utilize the services of the lower layer, you have to very carefully define the layers so that there is no lack of services. That is whatever services needed, they are all fulfilled by the defining of the layers. That is a challenging task. So careful planning is needed. For example, the device driver for the backing store, that is disk, must be at lower level than the memory management routines, because memory management requires the ability to use the backing store. So the memory management module has to access the disk, and that is only possible if memory management is put above the disk. If you put them in wrong order, the disk may be able to access the memory, but not vice versa. So it requires very careful planning. That is the major disadvantage of layered approach. And a final problem with the layered implementation is that it is less efficient. The reason that it is less efficient is that there is too many system calls needed, because see, if you compare this with the simple structure where any module can communicate with any module without any system call or any special arrangement, because they are all part of the same program. It's more like two functions in the same program calling each other. But here we are dividing them into layers, which means that interaction between layers requires a lot of system calls. So one layer has to interact with the next layer, and that layer has to interact with the next layer, and so on. So it all requires system calls, and there is also they will be trapped with the IO layer. So then it will be a tedious situation. So there will be too many system calls involved in the interaction between layers. At each layer the parameters also may be modified, and data may need to be passed, and so on. It becomes very complex. Each layer adds overhead to the system call, so there will be plenty of system calls to be tackled. So these limitations have caused a small backlash against layering in the recent years. So so ultimately what people want is that they don't completely reject layered approach, because layered approach is better than the simple structure, because here it's the code is better manageable. So you can add new layers to add a new functionality without rewriting or recompiling the entire operating system, and you can also modify a certain layer without affecting the whole operating system. So that is all advantages of the layered architecture. But it's also having the problem of too many system calls when there is a communication or interaction needed between layers. So what is the final suggestion is that having fewer layers. So reducing the number of layers seems to be having the better advantage in the implementation of layered architecture. The next major model is microkernels. So microkernels are more recent operating system design or structuring, in which the kernels are reduced. The sizes of the kernels are reduced. We saw how Unix operating system was implemented. Unix operating system is implemented as a single large monolithic kernel. So everything is part of the kernel, which means that you have to load the entire kernel into memory, and it will take a lot of memory space, and only the remaining memory will be available for the user process. So with the looking at that drawback, people have thought of microkernel. So microkernel was first introduced into the Mac operating system. So this method structures the operating system by removing all non-essential components from the kernel. So what is done to implement a microkernel is that the designer of the OS will only include the most essential components of the OS into its kernel, leaving out the non-essential components. So it is left to the designer of the OS what he considered as essential and what he considered as non-essential. But one thing is, he is now not going to allow every module to be included into the kernel. So the size of the kernel will be minimized. So the advantage is the result of that implementation is we are going to have a smaller kernel. Smaller kernel means taking lesser memory space and occupying the small portion of the memory. So as I told you, there is a little consensus regarding which services should be treated as kernel and which should be treated as non-essential, that is implementation specific. So typically the microkernel provides a minimal process and memory management in addition to a communication facility. So it will only have few functionalities offered as kernel, and the remaining functionalities, which are all treated as non-essential, they will be just running along with the user processes. Okay, so they don't require any privilege to call them. A user process can can invoke them straight away without going through any system call. It's only for invoking the essential services of the OS or the kernel services of the OS that the user process has to invoke the system calls, and the other non-essential services will be running in user space. And whenever there is a communication needed between the user process and the OS module, that is going to be done with the help of message passing. So message passing is a communication technique which we will explore later, that has been employed in this particular type of kernel. So for example, if the client program wishes to access a file, it must interact with the file server. So for that, the client program and the service never interact directly. They only interact through message passing. And this is an idea. So what you can observe in this example is that out of the services of, see, all these are services of the OS, but out of this only 3 are running as kernel services, which means only they will be having the privilege mode and you can't access the services directly. So system calls will be needed, mode switch will be needed. Okay, all that happens the kernel mode. Okay, so this will be running only in kernel mode, but the remaining services of the OS are going to be running in normal user mode, which means that no system call is needed and no mode switching is needed. They can be directly called by the user process. This is the idea of the microkernel. The benefit of microkernel approach is that it makes extending the operating system easier. So all new services are added to user space and consequently do not require modification of the kernel. Only when you want to add a service into the kernel, you have to modify the kernel. All other cases, you can just run a new service at the user space as if it is a user process without having any change in the kernel. So it is going to be much easier to port from one hardware design to another. The microkernel also provides more security and reliability since most services are running as user rather than kernel processes. If a service fails, the rest of the operating system remains. The reason that we say that this gives better security is that, see, when the entire OS is all the services are implemented into the kernel, there is more chance of the kernel being manipulated, corrupted by the user process. But when some services are running as, only few services are running as kernel and all the remaining as left to open as user services, the chances of the OS getting affected is by malicious programs is minimized. They still are it is still possible, but the chances are less. The next major approach, which is in fact the current trend, is loadable kernel module. So the idea of loadable kernel module is similar to layered approach, but it takes it to one more level. So perhaps the bestest current methodology of operating system design involves the usage of loadable kernel modules. So what happens here is that the kernel has a set of core components and links in additional services via modules either at boot time or during runtime. So it's more like linked library, dynamically linked libraries. Okay, so there is something called DLL. It has an idea that at runtime, when there is a need of a particular module, it gets loaded into the memory and it gets linked to the actual call. So the call will be fulfilled at runtime, unlike the previous layered or simple structures where the OS modules are loaded in advance into the memory. But here what happens is that the modules are held in the disk until they are called or invoked by any user process. So when there is a need to invoke them at runtime, dynamically they will be loaded into the memory. This is the idea behind loadable kernel modules. This type of design is common in most of the modern operating systems like Solaris, Linux, and even Windows operating system is following this. So without the idea of loadable kernel modules, an operating system would have to include all possible functionality compiled directly into the base kernel. So the base kernel or the kernel will have to incorporate all the modules of the OS, whether they are going to be needed or not, and this will consume lot of memory. Avoiding that and avoiding avoiding that particular thing of including all the modules into the OS and allowing them to be dynamically implemented and loaded is the best approach, which is what being followed in the loadable kernel. So linking services dynamically is preferable to adding new features directly to the kernel, which would require recompiling the kernel. So we might build a CPU scheduling and memory management algorithms directly into the kernel and then add support for different file systems by way of loadable kernel modules. So though this particular approach sounds like a layered approach, because here also we divide the logic of the OS into multiple modules, but it still differs in certain ways. One difference already we have seen, that here you can load the modules dynamically at runtime, which is not the case with the layered. So in the layered approach, you have to load all the layers into memory simultaneously at the beginning. Besides that difference, there are also other differences. The next difference is that it does not need any message passing for two different layers to interact. Comparing not like the unlike the layered approach, which needed message passing for interaction. Here there is no message passing needed. They can simply communicate directly. So no special mechanism is needed. The Solaris operating system structure is organized around a core kernel. So this is the example of the loadable kernel. So see, for example, if this particular module is suddenly needed, it can be loaded and can be connected with the kernel. So there is you don't need to load all the modules of the kernel at memory into memory. They can be loaded and unloaded depending upon the need of the operating system. The last approach is a hybrid approach. So any operating system design, it does not generally go by a single approach. It's neither layered alone or loadable kernel alone. So practical implementation of operating systems, they generally combine the different approaches. That's what we call it as a hybrid. So hybrid is not a new approach. It is just a combination of the existing schemes. So for example, if you take the Linux and Solaris, they are monolithic in one aspect, because they have a single address space. They provide a single address space for implementation. So in that way, they can be considered as a monolithic structure. But on the other hand, they are also modular, so that new functionality can be dynamically added to the kernel. So they combine the feature of monolithic or single structure with the feature of layered approach. And in the same way, Windows also provides support for dynamically loaded kernel modules. So these are the various types of operating system structures. So the basic discussion we had is about OS structure. So OS structuring is nothing but designing the OS, especially the OS kernel, either as a single large kernel, or as collection of modules, or as collection of layers, or as loadable kernels, or simply a combination of one or more of these techniques. So we discussed those techniques, and be familiar with these concepts. Thank you.